Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Leading Minds podcast, where we interview entrepreneurs on a weekly basis, discussing topics in and around mental health and how they've overcome those challenges. Today's episode is going to be one of a few episodes that we're going to be doing over the coming months about addiction. It'd be unfair to do one podcast about addiction because there are so many elements to addiction, and the problems that people face in and around addiction. Today, we're going to be covering the topic of alcoholism, which over the last 18 months with people being in lockdown, the increase in alcohol consumption has been enormous, which is obviously going to lead to addiction issues moving forward. So today, our guest, very old friend of mine and CEO of Hang It Services, James. Thanks very much for coming on, mate.
Thanks for inviting me.
So listen, the first thing that I want to do is I want to kind of get some clarity about what alcoholism is, right? Because people will have their own conceptions and misconceptions. So give us in a nutshell how you would describe the addiction of alcoholism.
Alcoholism for me, it manifests as a physical allergy. So once I start drinking, I don't get to control how much I take. It's a mental obsession. So no matter how many times I get burned by it, I still want to go back and continue to repeat that behaviour. So I have a body that says I can't, and I've got a mind that says I must. So there's my malady.
So you were talking about, before when we started the podcast, you were talking about this kind of elevator of addiction. Yeah. So just describe that. Just go into that in a bit of detail and link that back to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that you've got to go. You know I did. I thought, oh, I don't drink as much as that person. My life hasn't got bad enough that I'm an alcoholic. I'd see sort of things, whether it was in media publications, movies, TV shows. The idea that we have that an alcoholic is a guy that sits on a park bench somewhere drinking bottles of whiskey out of a brown bag. That's what we think an alcoholic.
Right.
I'm just sat in a park wetting myself, or walking around the street. So we've got this quite of idea of what we think someone who is an alcoholic is. But alcoholism it's like an elevator, the bottom, is death. That's where it leads to. But there are multiple levels on the way down, and you can get out at any level you want to. Just because you haven't lost as much as someone else, doesn't mean that you can't start your journey in recovery. It's not like a qualification, like, oh well, I've lost my home, I've lost my kids, I've lost my job, I've lost my health. Now
it's time for me to go into recovery.
Now I qualify for being an alcoholic. That's not how it works. Not from my experience, anyway. There's no sort of criteria. In one of the 12-step recovery programs, the qualification for being in recovery is to simply have a desire to stop drinking. That's it.
Yeah. I remember when you first gave up drinking, because obviously we've known each other for a hell of a long time, and you said something to me, and at the time I kind of dismissed it, but it stuck with me. And this is going back nearly 10 years, right? This was kind of the early stages of you going into recovery. And you said, you don't need to drink every day to be an alcoholic. And you said something along the lines of, you drink every weekend, and when you drink a truckload. That's alcoholism. That's an addiction. And that really hit me. I was like, really? Because for me, it was exactly what you've said, is the person who's homeless with his can of superintendents in a brown paper bag, and he wakes up and he has a drink, and he can't go through the day without it. And that really hit me, because I was at that point, I had that misconception that, I wasn't an alcoholic, or I didn't have a drink problem because I was only drinking a couple of times a week. But like you said earlier on, it's not necessarily the quantity, is it?
No, it's more the reason why. It's why you drink, and it's also your behaviour around the drink. Fundamentally, if I start drinking, I don't get to choose when I stop. That's an issue. And if you struggle with that as well, it would amaze me when we go out with friends of ours at the time, back in the day, and they get to like 11:30, 12 o'clock, and I'm kicking it up into a new gear.
Right. It's true.
I'm about to. Now I'm really going to go for it. Like all that pre was just a warm up for me. Now I'm going to go for it. And I'd be at the bar with someone, and they go, "Oh, I'll have a water." I'm like, what? Why you? They're like, "Yeah, no, I've had enough." What do you mean you've had enough? There's never enough. And there's again, it's difficult to not talk in too many bumper stickers, but again, some of the things that are thrown around in recovery is that one is too many and 1,000 is not enough. Yeah. And that's what it means from that. Once you start drinking, you don't get to control how much you take. And that's one part of it, but the other part of it also is if I would try to stop for any prolonged period of time. Now, this could be for a health reason. This could be because as a consequence, such as maybe my partner at the time saying to me, "That's it. You were way out of control last night," and you wake up with that resolution the next morning, that resolve to go, "Today I am not going to drink. I'm not going to drink." And if you were to put me on a polygraph test, I'd be telling the truth.
Your intention would be there, right?
I would be telling the truth. But at some point during the day, I'd forget. There would be this overwhelming feeling of discomfort and disorganization in myself that I'd have such inner turmoil. Now, that could be from something that I'd done that people did know about, that I was in trouble for, something that I'd done that wasn't yet knowledge, that might happen. So I've got the anxiety of something happening. And at that particular point, the turmoil would be so bad, I know that I would get some ease and comfort from taking a drink. Now, that's not abnormal behavior in the sense of, if one of you got, you have a bad day at work, and we were talking about this earlier, you have a bad day at work and something goes wrong, or whatever, just a bad day in general. You have a couple of beers later, or it's a Friday night, you have a couple of beers, you feel better about it. You're like, "Oh, that doesn't matter so much. Oh, I was worried about that thing, and I was going to send that narky email back to that customer, or I was going to engage in that thing with that. Oh, do you know what? It doesn't matter." And that's just normal. That's just what people do. You have a couple of drinks and you don't worry about things as much. The trouble is, for people like me, is that once I have that first drink, I want the second more than the first, the third more than the second, the fourth more than the third, and so on and so on and so on. And again, my moral compass, stone cold sober, is strong. I don't break the law. I don't do things to upset people. I avoid confrontation. All of those things. I try to be a decent, upstanding member of society. You stick 7 or 8 drinks into me, and regardless of how long you have known me for, right, like if you hadn't met me pre-recovery and you'd known me for the last 10 years, you would have this view of me of how you think I am.
That's right, yeah.
You stick 5 drinks inside me, I'll introduce you to someone you've never met.
Yeah,
And that's the problem.
You saying that really interests me, because especially when you went into the mindset side of it, is it almost like, and you can't even say it's not you, because essentially it is you, but it might be a part of you that you just necessarily don't like and don't want to show people. Would you almost say that when you did have a drink, it just brought out this subconscious, subdued other James, which isn't a nicer person, does break the law if he's had a few drinks and stuff? Because that really interests me. It's something that I was never a big drinker. For me, it was drugs, and like you have said, it brings out another side of you. And my friends, like, they made up a nickname for that person as well, and so I used to laugh it off and things like that. But it's really resonating with me, you saying that, because I'm like, well, clearly I'm not the only one that thinks that and has been through that experience as well. But I'd love to get kind of your take on that.
What in like
Almost like a suppressed version. I think
Yeah,
that's
but,
what
that,
you're
but,
saying.
again,
It's
that,
like a
but
alter ego.
again, that's not the authentic you. That person that comes out when you drink or use is not the authentic you. The authentic you is the person that you hide from everybody. And the reason that you drink, and the reason that I drank, and the reason that I did these things is because I was worried that people wouldn't like the real me anyway. So that version that comes out when I drink, that's not who I really am. You know, that person who I really am, the authentic me, was hidden for a long, long time. I drank because I was worried that they wouldn't like the real me. You know, so say for instance, generally I might be quite quiet. You know, all these things that I think people won't like, but then you put a few drinks inside me, and I become the life of the party. I become the thing that I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
But not actually the real me. I become the thing. I become like the almost like the entertainment.
Would you go as far to say, right? And I'm saying this from my own experience. Would you go as far to say that the unhappiness or unknowing of oneself, so not knowing who you truly are, actually fuels the alcoholism, because you lean more towards the person you become under the influence?
Unhappiness. A lot of it is how we view ourselves. Okay, so as alcoholics or addicts in particular ways, we generally have quite low self-worth, low self-esteem, and we have a lot of fear. Fear is absolutely the number one thing. It's fear, why we behave the way that we do. Such as, if you got to know the real me, you wouldn't like me. So if I do this, if I take these few drinks and I become confident,
The fear of rejection at that time,
like you become all of these things.
Yeah.
So you're sort of, essentially what I would do is I would have, because I had different groups of friends. I had like yourself, and then I had some mates over in sort of Twyford, and I had other mates. But I was too much to handle for any one group.
Yeah.
I couldn't go out with you Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because it would be you'd be like, oh my God, this guy. But you could handle a night. So I'd go one night over there, one night over here, one night over there. And for each of those different groups of people, depending on where I was in the hierarchy of that group, I'd have a different master put on, a different part to play. And the alcohol helped provide that engine, if you like.
So let's go into that pre-recovery. So when we did used to go out, it was there was no stopping you. And I'm going to talk from my own personal experience, and you can talk about how you actually perceived it at that time.
Yeah.
And I think there was an element of peer pressure, because, you know, and sadly now, at the time we used to laugh about it, but, you know, like he touched on, at 11 o'clock in the night, everybody's like, you know, kind of waving a bit, and he'd be racking up 5 tequilas on the bar, and we'd be like, yeah, James, go on, son. And bang, 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 bang. No, that's after a truckload of drinking before that, right? Now, if I look back at that now, knowing how much that you've come along, I didn't see that as an issue at the time. Do you see what I mean? My perception of what we were doing at that time, it was normal.
Lots of people assume, and like I did at the stage, that when you're younger, because we were what?
18, 19,
19, something like that. A lot of people, especially older, you know, I say people around our age, but maybe our parents in the sort of late 30s, early 40s, if you know of someone who's sort of late teens, early 20s, who's behaving in the way that I was at the time, we, from a society perspective, we assume that it's just a phase and they will grow out of it.
Yeah.
I didn't grow out of it, I grew into it. There was a difference, you know. There's a lot of people that went, oh yeah, you know, between like 18 to 22 was a little bit crazy.
Mm-hmm.
We did some sort of stuff like that. I have minimal recollection from 18 to about 28, 27. There's 10 years of my life that I'm not. I'd have to look back at my CV, right? Figure out. I've got like an old one on an old Hotmail account somewhere or something like that, you know. I'd have to look back and figure out where I was working. Then I could figure out where I was living, and then I might be able to figure out, like, someone said to me, "What did you do when you were 21? Summer of your 21st year." I couldn't tell you where I went, whether I went to Spain, Ibiza, Tenerife, didn't go on holiday, where I was working. I'd have to look back at it. I spent so much time in almost like a blackout of my life. I just don't remember it. There's whole periods of time that I don't recall, and I was really growing into it. I could have gone into recovery at 20, easily, but I wasn't ready. I hadn't ticked those, again, like I said about the elevator. I perceived that I hadn't qualified yet. And then what happened as I went along in life, as people got older and they started doing things. So say, for instance, they got into relationships, they had children, got married, all of these things. I always perceived that they were the steps that you needed to take in order to be happy. And I always assumed that once I was happy, I then wouldn't drink the way that I did.
It's societal conditioning to a certain degree.
So it's like, if I've got these things, then I'll be content. And contentment means that I won't need to drink, because I was unaware of the physical allergy and the mental obsession. I didn't know that I had those at that particular time. I thought that my alcoholism was circumstantial. I thought I drank because of my circumstances, but my circumstances were actually because I drank.
Yeah.
You know, there's I try not to. I was listening to a podcast the other day on something, and it says, I think we spoke about this on the phone the other day. We are all self-made.
Yeah.
But only the successful will admit it.
Yeah.
You know, I was where I was at in my life because of my decisions.
Yeah. But from the outside looking in, see, now you're talking about it, I'm getting flashbacks, right? And from the outside looking in, I actually thought that you'd gone into recovery really early. And I'll go as far to say that I didn't think, I just thought your recovery was a phase and not your drink. Now, how messed up is that? That's what I was thinking. Because so, a normal night would be, we used to start off at my mum and dad's back then, wasn't it? And we'd polish up a bottle of vodka before we'd go out. But he'd polish his off in 2-3 minutes. And our perception was, it's just James, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
But then what you wouldn't have known is that before I even got to yours, I'd have preloaded as it was.
Well, exactly.
And then I'd do things like, oh, we're out, I'll go get some more.
Yeah.
So I'd walk over to Threshers. Yes, I'd bring a bottle back, but I'd probably drink something on the, 40 paces from Threshers
it's
to
literally
your house.
across the road, right?
So I'd drink a little something on the way. Because I was always, and again, I want to try and be absolutely adamant, it's not to do with the volume of the alcohol that you drink. It's not the amount that you drink. It's why you drink, you know. So as I was telling you earlier, I know a story of someone that she used to go and buy 3 bottles of wine in the morning. She'd drive around all day doing her job, and the bottles of wine would be in the boot. And she'd drive around with the radio off all day, and she'd listen to the bottles chinking. So it wouldn't matter how many difficult situations or how hard her day was, or if she'd just been in a really difficult client's house or something, or an office or whatever, and normally, you know, she'd get in the car, she'd drive around, the bottles would go clink, 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 and she'd be like, it's all going to be okay.
Just because she could hear.
Just because she could hear it. Now, that could have been 12 bottles. That could have been 2 bottles. It could have been 2 little miniatures. But the matter of the fact is that her solution to her day was in the back of the car. You know, now whether that is 2 glasses of wine every single night, 365 days a year, or whether that is not drinking anything all week. How many people do you know, and I know, from my experience itself, I know people that can go through all sorts of stuff a week because they know Friday night.
That's right.
Friday night's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for it. How many people go through health kicks and they say, right, 90 days, no booze. No booze for 90 days. And they can do that. The resolve of some people is incredible. They can do that because they know day 91.
Yeah, that's right.
It's there, isn't it?
It's
The
gonna
carrot's
get
dangling
on.
there, yeah.
Day 91, 92 and 93, I am out of it. We're going to go up to Manchester for the weekend. We're going to have a proper wild one. I'm going to reward myself for doing the 90 days. It exists, it exists in society. We do it. We see it all the time. Give up this for so long. Give up that for so long.
But because you've got the end date.
There's no point giving anything up if you're going to go back to the behaviour.
Yeah.
Straight away. If you go back to that exact behaviour, like if I give up chocolate, if my bad thing is to eat, a big bar of dairy milk every night, right? And then I go, right, no chocolate for 90 days. And then from day 91, I start eating a big bar of chocolate all I've done is I've just had a respite from the behaviour.
That's right.
Haven't changed the behaviour.
Yeah.
I've just had a respite from
You've just not ate
on
chocolate.
self-will alone, I've gone, right, 90 days.
But like you said, you've already attached it because as soon as you start day one,
You're back on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only a few
And
more
so-
weeks and I've not got to do this anymore.
And then you just
Repeat that cycle.
You take one more trip down the same road again, and then like 6 months later, you go, "Oh, I'm eating chocolate every day. I'll do 90 days." Or whatever we're abstaining from something. It's the changing of the behaviour.
Yeah.
And the thing is with alcoholism is I had absolutely no idea how to do life whatsoever. That was my fundamental problem. Is I was unequipped to do life. I did not know how to do it. So as I was sort of saying to earlier, I'd look at what all the other people had, and so I almost look at it like it was a life list, and I go, right, so what you do is you get a job, okay, got that, and then you get a girlfriend or a partner or a boyfriend or whatever, you go, okay, got that, brilliant, and then you get a house, okay, then you have some kids, yep, and then you get a car that you like, yes, and then you do this, and you go, right, I've now ticked off all of those things, and I'm still desperately unhappy. What's going to make that better? Well, I'll have a drink. So I looked at all the other stuff that people had, and I assumed those things were the key to their happiness. So therefore, if I got all of those things, I would then be happy. And when you have all those things, and you're still not happy, then you are really in a tricky situation.
And that's exactly where you were.
Because you've explored everything that society tells you to be happy. You've got it all. And you're still not happy. So where do you go from that point?
You mentioned the circumstances that you were in, and that's piqued my interest because something you mentioned earlier, it's individual for everyone. I would love to get into, because you mentioned from 18 to 20 years old that you kind of were already addicted to alcohol and consuming it and partying. What did your circumstances look like from let's go from 20 to 25, 20 to maybe 28?
Not really very far. My eldest boy is now 14. So I was 25 when I started family life started for me. Sort of 20 to 25, basically just muddled around, not really getting anywhere. I was a golf pro in a training program, but what I lacked was the ability to concentrate and dedicate myself to studying. So therefore, I never completed the course. I just wasted time.
And he was good.
I didn't,
really good.
I didn't complete the course. So I got to a decent level, and I turned pro, and then I basically just went around, ballsing up every job that I went to. I'd be there for a period of time, and things would happen, and I'd get more resentful and more irritated by the environment or the circumstances. And then at some particular point, I would, because of the way I drank, I would lose control and it would all come out sideways. You know, I had a job once, and this is back in 2000, and I thought it was going to be a really good job. It was a really prestigious, famous golf club, and it was going to be like, everyone sold it to me, including my boss at my current job, all sold it to me as like this opportunity. This was the big time. This was like, you know, this was top tier of a place to work in the area that I live in. And it wasn't. You know, my job was essentially to fold shirts and sell Mars bars and clean people's golf clubs. Now, that might very well be the process of being an assistant golf pro. You have to do some of the menial jobs to start, but I got there and I was already very unhappy about that. I sort of had a grandeur of like, I'm a golf professional.
Yep.
Why should, you know? And I'm in the back with a little tub of hot water and a little club cleaner cleaning some bloke's clubs and folding up Hugo Boss shirts, and, you know, having a conversation with some woman about what colour tea pegs she should use, and I'm just there like going, Jesus Christ, what is this all about? And because of my inability to process this, because I'd stopped maturing. When I started drinking alcoholic, my sort of maturity just stopped. So I was kind of 16, 17 years old, trapped in a 21-year-old's body. So I was very immature, and it's really hard to do life when you're of that mentality. And so what did I do? I got invited to a event at the club. And one of the members, he sort of told me off for not cleaning his club properly, like indirectly, like he was like, oh, you know, you haven't cleaned my clubs properly. And I was like already seething. And I basically went to an event that night and took my girlfriend at the time and got absolutely, like, I started drinking. You know, it was kind of the new guy, and I was there. I remember with my girlfriend at the time, she was going, look, take it easy. He said, take it easy. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take it easy. You know, it's a big function. It's an event at the club with my boss, all the important people. This is not the time to make an idiot out of yourself. But I have a physical allergy to alcohol. So once I start drinking, I don't get to control how much I take. So therefore, and this, I was unaware of this at the time. I didn't know about recovery, didn't know about the 12 steps. But in hindsight, what I had was a physical allergy to alcohol. So I started drinking, and I didn't get to control that evening how much I consumed. And then all of the things that I was upset about, so my resentment to my position in the club, my resentment to the bloke that sort of scolded me almost for not cleaning his clubs, they all came out sideways at the most inconvenient of time. So what did I do? I got really pissed and pretty much jumped across the table at this guy that had scolded me for not cleaning his clubs. Got called in the next morning, got fired. Now, my mentality at that particular moment when I was driving out of that golf club after getting fired was how they had wronged me.
So you were the victim.
I was the victim. How dare they? I was the victim. Even though nothing that, you know, as an, you know, a person that's got his own business now, trying to look at it in a sense, if I knew nothing about recovery, if I just taken if I just taken an 18-year-old lad on his first function and he'd done that, I'd have sacked him as well.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
He's just embarrassed me in front of maybe 2,000 members at my, you know, event or business or whatever. Absolutely, I'd fire him on the spot. But it's quite hard to look at things in that way when you have the sort of information that you know. But yes, I drove out of that golf club the victim. And guess what? I then went to work at another golf club and I pretty much repeated the same behaviour. And again, I left as the victim. And then I went over to Southern Ireland and I did exactly the same thing. And got fired and left as the victim. All of these times, all of these circumstances where my behaviour and the things I had done had caused the problem, I always walked out with the victim mentality, like I had been done wrong.
Do you think psychologically you're using that as an excuse to go back to the drink because that's your comfort?
Well, you go back to it because it's the only way that I could do life. Because if you imagine, if the way to look at guilt, or I used to look, the way that I look at guilt nowadays is you have to imagine it like it's a concrete slab laying on your chest, right? And the more that you do, the bigger the slab gets. It's more guilt, and it hurts. It's difficult. Yeah. But when I take a couple of drinks, the weight would get lighter. I wouldn't feel so bad about it. I'd almost switch it around and go, it wasn't my fault. It was their fault.
Yeah.
It's down on you. It's your fault that this thing happened. But then the trouble is, coupled with the physical allergy and the mental obsession, when I wake up the next morning, the slab's going to be bigger. The consequences and the guilt's going to be even thicker. And that's going to weigh down on me for a while. But then I take a drink and then I don't worry about it as much. But then it thickens and the load gets heavier. And it just goes on and on and on and on. So there's lots of...
Let's talk about how dark it really got for you, right? And the moment before your recovery. From the outside looking in, like I said, from because we're talking about it from two different perspectives, right? Is me watching you go through that, and then you actually living it. And I think for me, the time that I realized that you had an issue, that you had a problem, was back in 2008 when we were in Manchester.
I forgot about that.
I didn't. We were away. We'd been away. We'd gone to Leeds for one night, and then you met us in Manchester, right? So we were just having this mad weekend, and we'd been out, and we'd got home late, but we had to get up early because we were going to do something. I can't remember what we were going to do. It's about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and James is not in the apartment. And then he walks in through the door, totally drunk. And what he's done is he's gone downstairs to the bar, stolen 2 bottles of wine, necked them, literally, and then come back. And he's come back in, hammered. And that's when I realised that you had a problem. And that's when I started to really worry about you. Because... again, all those years I thought it was just you being you, but that hit me, and for me that was one of the darkest moments. I mean, obviously I had times when your mum used to call me up and say, right, where's James, and James is hanging out of a telephone box, like been there all night. What was the darkest moment for you?
I don't want to sort of dismiss those times, but those things I've got loads of those. I've got multiple physical, embarrassing. I've got loads of them. You know, the darkest time is when there's what you believe about yourself or you believe about the world, and then it's sort of evident to you it's completely wrong. Now that could be something quite small as I would sometimes get so drunk after work, if I finished early, I could finish at like maybe 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and I'd be smashed by 4, and then I'd wake up at 6, and I'd look at the clock to the left of my bed, and at that particular instance, I was not sure whether it was 6 o'clock at night, and I've got 6 o'clock at night, and I've missed a work day, right? That's option number 1. Option number 2, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. This is the winter, it's dark, right? So it's 6 o'clock in the morning and I've got to go to work in an hour. Or it's 6 o'clock that evening and I've just passed out for an hour. They're like the 3 really worrying moments. The amount of fear that leaps on you at that instant when you look at a clock and you're like, right, is it 6 a.m.? because then I'm in trouble, because at this precise phone moment, I am pissed as hell and I feel like shit. And you're like, oh, it's not 6 a.m. And your next thing is like, okay, is it Monday or is it Wednesday? Because if it's Wednesday, I'm in big trouble. If it's Monday, that's not so bad. And you go, oh, it's Monday. And you go, oh, it's okay. I just passed out for an hour. Wow, guess I better start drinking again. Nothing else to do. My life's terrible. It's horrendous. I'm on my own. It's all going down the pan. I can't handle how I feel. I'll start drinking again. So that's the sort of, that's one of, that's a low moment.
Because you're constantly reliving that. You're constantly reliving that, right?
But for me, I think the worst, I've had moments, I've had times in my life where I've wanted to recover, I wanted to be in recovery, and I wanted to get sober. I've had my parents begging me. I've had my partner at the time, my kid's mum, begging me. I've been in a hospital bed with my kids down the end looking at me, you know, because I've taken one more trip down this route of oblivion, and that has not got me sober. The lowest moment was I've had lots of really sort of bad physical, I've had withdrawals, DTs, I've had lots of bad physical and, you know, with issues from alcohol. I've had lots of embarrassing things that would almost embarrass people sober. But I remember the not the lowest point, but the point in which I decided to do something about it was when for the first time in my life, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror one evening. It was New Year's Eve, actually. And it's like, I didn't know who it was. That was the moment. The moment was that was the darkest moment.
You just didn't recognise yourself.
Just didn't know who it was. You know, that was the worst thing. And that's when I then phoned my best friend, you know, and my sponsor, you know, who'd been sponsoring at the time, and said, look, I'm in real trouble here. And he said to me, not the most loving thing he ever said, he says, have you had enough now? I was like, yeah, I have.
It's actually quite a powerful statement though, isn't it?
And the trouble is, I'd been in recovery before, and I'd gone in, and I wanted to make this, I'd been in recovery before about 3 or 4 years earlier, and one of the really important things for me about recovery is that, and this sort of leads into what we're going to, you know, talking about with business and things like this at a late, you know, shortly, but I was always making deals with the universe as to why I should stop drinking and get sober. I was negotiating, you know, like a contract in some sort of sense, and I was going, right, I'll tell you what, if you give me a nice house with a loving family, I've got a loving family anyway, but I'd like to live with them. I'd like a nice house, a loving family, a good job. I would like all these things, right? If you do that for me, universe, I will get sober and I will stop
You're
drinking.
attaching conditions, basically.
I'm attaching conditions to being sober. And in the first instance, when I came into recovery, when I say I wasn't ready because I was attaching conditions to my recovery, such as I wasn't with my children and my partner at the time, and I shouldn't have been, 100%. I was, you know, should not have been there. But my condition was, in my head, well, I'll get sober if I get them back. But if I don't get them back, I'm going to get pissed.
Yeah.
And I'll get sober if I can move up the ladder in my profession. But if the universe doesn't give me that, there's no point staying sober, so I'll get pissed. So all of these things were conditions.
It's almost an excuse, isn't it?
Well, I was giving myself an out.
Yeah.
I was giving myself an out for going back to recover, going back to getting pissed.
Yeah.
And what I have learned from recovery this time round, which is coming up 9 years, I think it's 9 years, 10 years, 9 years, I think, is that everything in my life is a byproduct of recovery, not the point.
Yeah.
So I have, all the things I have in my life are because of recovery. But none of these things are if I lose something, if something happens to any of that stuff, my recovery still has to be constant. There's a guy round near me, and he says, if you put recovery in your life first, if you make recovery the most important thing, everything in your life will be first class. But if you put anything above recovery, it won't work. So it is the most important thing in my life, and that's a really difficult thing to try and explain to anybody. Your partner, your children, your family, your friends, your business, all these things that you want, they are all secondary. Not in the sense of they're not less important,
No.
but I need to do
That's right.
recovery and sobriety first. That enables me to be who I am in this precise moment.
Yeah.
If I start putting pound coins above recovery, I'm in trouble.
Then it's a downward spiral.
And there's many a time, and especially in my early years, when I was back sort of in the family home, that the kids like, well, I wanted to read the kids a story or spend a bit of time with them, but I would go to a meeting and I might miss bedtime, and I might miss bath time, and I'd be like, oh, I'm missing this. Oh, and I'd almost feel a little bit of guilt about that, but it was explained to me how important going to that meeting was.
So you've talked about recovery a lot, right? We've talked about you going into recovery, and I know one of the core fundamentals for you now is you follow a 12-step program.
Yeah.
So just talk to us about and explain what recovery is and what the 12-step program is and how it helps you in your life.
Well, the 12-step program, the first thing to do, or the first thing that I had to do was have the courage. I don't know. I had to go and sit in a meeting, and I had to listen to people. I chose to listen to people's stories, and what they do is they just share their experience, their strength, and their hope about how they've done life. And the 12 Steps is a program. It's through a book, and you find someone who can sponsor you and take you through the program. And their job is to basically walk you through the program and tell you how they have done, or how they've got to where they are in their recovery. I don't think it's really appropriate to talk too much about the recovery and what each individual step is. But what I would say is I would encourage people to go to a meeting and sit down and listen. You'll go, there's loads of people that are sadly not with us anymore because they couldn't sit in a chair. That does happen. The answer to a lot of my problems, and a big chunk of my problems, was in the rooms of a 12-step program. And there are multiple different 12-step programs that you can go to. There's alcoholism, there's drugs. They're the main two places that people visit. But also, if you've got issues with food or you've got issues with sex, there are lots of different 12-step programs. They fundamentally follow the same principles, but do not think for a second that these aren't available to you. You can go online, you can look for a 12-step meeting depending on what you believe you're suffering from or you have an issue with, and there will be one local to you. There's also helplines that you can ring, and that I found really, really important, because I remember when I first phoned the helpline, what happened was someone was able, it was almost like I had all this stuff in my head of how I thought I felt, but I could never describe it.
Yeah.
And when I spoke to this person on the phone, it's as if they plucked it out of my mind and described exactly. I'd never been able to describe how I was feeling, and this person described it. It was almost like I was an alien dropped on this planet and everyone was talking a different language. And then I finally met someone who spoke in a language that I understood.
Well, this is key, isn't it? Because this is what we talk about pretty much every week, is there's going to be people out there that are going to be going through very different situations. It doesn't necessarily all have to be exactly the same as yours. But a guaranteed fact is whatever anybody's going through when it comes to alcoholism or addiction, somebody else has already experienced it.
There are groups out there of all different types of people. You know, like I say, my primary was I mean, at the time, look, you were saying, you know, I had an issue with drugs, and I wasn't quite sure at the time whether I should go into maybe like a narcotics fellowship or an alcoholic fellowship. Wasn't sure which one it was, but someone gave me a great piece of advice, which is at some particular point you have to pick a seat and sit in it, instead of floating between the two things. And what I found is that once I stopped I never take drugs sober, but you stick a few drinks inside me and I'm on the phone to a dealer, it's a good idea. You know, so my primary was always alcohol. And once I dealt with that issue, drugs have never become just doesn't interest me. There's no, I don't see the point.
Let's just go back to the core principles. I know you don't want to go too much in depth into the actual 12 steps, but what are the core principles that you take away from that you apply to your recovery and your daily life? Okay,
so the core principles for me on a daily basis are I get up as a standard day. I get up in the morning. Now, I try to, a lot of people, you can like kind of say I can center myself or whatever. I generally have a conversation with what I call a higher power. Now, you can call that God, you can call it whatever you want to, but I believe that there is something out there that I connect with. Essentially, what alcoholism says is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. That's step one in the 12-step fellowship. You know, in NA, it's something like we admitted this, we were powerless over drugs, and that our life had become unmanageable. If it's food and sex, or whatever, you know, it's the general principle of the step is the same. And what that says is that I can't live with it. I admitted that I was powerless over alcohol. I can't live with it, and that my life is unmanageable. That I can't live without it. So I can't live with it, and I can't live without it. And then step two would be, came to believe that a power greater than me could restore me to sanity.
That higher power you speak of, you say you have a conversation each morning, is that out loud? Is that in your head? Is it journaled?
It's however the individual chooses to do it. It's however you can sit down and have a conversation with the way that the fellowships have got around being tied with a religious sort of point is they say, they use this wonderful thing and they say, you can pick a God of your understanding. That makes it open to everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's invited.
Yeah.
It doesn't say you must pick a Christian God. You have to pick this God, you have to pick that God. But this is the God, this is the only God. They say, God of your understanding. Everybody can come in. It's amazing. So you have this conscious contact with the God of your understanding. And essentially, because I admitted that I'm powerless, I now, through the purpose of the 12 steps is to put you in conscious contact with a power that can help you do what you cannot do yourself. So on my own, I am powerless against alcohol. But the purpose of the program is to give you this contact with a power that can. That's essentially what it is. A good friend of mine describes it in a beautiful way, and it helps to sort of sometimes visualize it a little bit. But the way that he describes it is, he said that your power is the end of one tunnel, is the end of a tunnel, right? And you're at the other end. And in the middle, between you and that power, is a load of boxes. And that is all the crap of your life. All the stuff you've done, all the things you've hidden, all the things that cause you to be resentful, all your fears, all your insecurities, everything that, and you can sort of see a tiny crack of the light, and I like to envisage it as a light. You can see a little bit of the light at the end of the tunnel, but you can't see all of it. And the purpose of the steps is to clear away all those boxes. So you've got a direct contact with that power. So that's essentially what the purpose of the program is. Now, on a daily basis, the purpose is not to chuck any more shit in the tunnel. You know, don't get involved in, try not to. There's no point clearing it all away and then go, woohoo, I've done recovery, and then just go off on your life and be an arsehole, because you're just going to fill it back up again. And eventually, at some point, you will become disconnected from that power, and you will have to go back.
So those principles are fundamental in the way that you conduct yourself with other people.
Yeah, it's fundamental that
Yeah.
you conduct yourself on how you conduct yourself on a daily basis. I don't want to go home with anything that I didn't wake up in the morning with, like a resentment or
Negative emotions, basically.
Yeah. I try to clear everything. I either try to clear anything up that I do get involved in during the day, or I have like this little buffer. It may be, it's not unique to me, I'm sure, but like there's like something happens, like I want to get involved in it, but there's like a little buffer that just says you don't want nothing to do with that, because you're going to get involved in this altercation with this person of something, and what's going to happen is they're going to drive 50 yards down the road and they're going to go, and they're never going to think about it again. What you're going to do is you're going to chuck it in your figurative backpack and you're going to lug it home with you, and all night you're going to be like, oh, that fucking person did this and this thing, and so what you've got there is a resentment. And then what you do is you go out the next day and then you pick another one up.
Yeah.
There's a guy called Ed Mutum used to talk about it. He said he's got an amazing story. If you ever Google the guy Ed Mutum, he was you have to listen to his story. It is phenomenal, like what he did in his life. But he used to talk about it. He said, I go into a room, there'd be 100 people in there. 99 people think I'm the best thing since sliced bread. They absolutely love me. One person thinks I'm an arsehole. Who's got my attention?
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, the arsehole's got your attention. So what he would call that is a 1. And he said I had an imaginary backpack, and in the bag would go the 1. And that person would take up so much space in my head. And he said, essentially, I spent my whole life walking around with a bag of 1s. All these people that he'd picked up from various different areas, and they were resentments. But that's just the way that he was made, the way that his circumstances had happened. And one part of his recovery was learning how to put down the bag of 1s. Beautiful story that he's got. It's quite phenomenal. I'll send you the link to it. It's amazing.
Would you say then, the way you've just described all of that, is that not only does the 12-step program help you overcome addiction, it helps you in every single aspect of life to be a better human being?
Yeah, absolutely. The 12-step program, it's really hard because the 12-step program would absolutely benefit everybody, but you have to be in a certain spot of despair to go and do a 12-step program. As you go further through the steps, it's coming to believe in a higher power. Lots of people do that. We have religion all over the world that believe in a higher power. But then you do things like make a list of all of the things that have gone wrong in your life and look at your part in it. Look at your fears. Admit to another person. One of the steps is you admit to another person imagine writing down all your deepest and darkest that you've got, right, and admitting it to someone else and looking at your part in it.
Yeah.
How liberating would that be?
Because we never point the finger to ourselves.
But
that'd be so it'd be liberating to do, but
it's scary.
why would
It is scary.
You might look at not necessarily yourself, but there might be people out there going, why would I do that?
Yeah.
Why would I write down all these things that I've done and admit it to someone else and then look at my part in it as well? That sounds balmy.
Yeah.
Why would I do that? But how freeing it becomes from going through that process. Now, you don't have to have an addiction to make that journey. There are plenty of, professionals and people that you can take a similar journey with. Self-development coaches and therapists. Absolutely, I would encourage anyone to go and take a journey of discovery along those routes. You don't have to have an addiction or alcohol, to take that journey. So we write down all these lists of people's, and then we do this other amazing thing, which all the people that we've wronged, where possible, unless it should cause harm to them, such as if you've, kind of irrelevant, but you can't go and make an amends to someone that's going to make you feel better but screw up their life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? So you can't, if you've slept with someone's wife or something, you can't go and knock on their door and say, I am really sorry for sleeping with your wife 3 years ago. Cheers. And then wander off because you've just turned their she might not have told him, or he might not be aware of it, or whatever the circumstances are. You can't chuck someone else's, set someone else's house on fire to keep yours in order. So unless the circumstances are going to cause particular harm to someone else, but you can, where you've been at fault, go and admit you're wrong. And what you're not doing, you're not excusing yourself for your behavior. I'm not excusing myself for my behavior. All I'm saying is that I did this thing and it was wrong, and I recognize that it was wrong, and I am sorry. Now, some people will go, thank you very much, and some people will tell you to fuck off. That, again, is nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
I remember, it's like, the more you talk, the more you remember things that happened. I went back to a golf club that I worked at about 3-4 years ago now, right? And I saw a guy up there. Now, he hasn't seen me since I was 18 years old, right? And I walked up to this golf club, and he came walking across the putting green. And he goes to me, "You right, you little prick?" Now, at that precise moment, everything in me just went, do you not know all the stuff I've been through, all this work I've done on myself, all these things that have happened, and how dare you walk across, you haven't seen me in 20 years nearly, walk across here and go, "All right, you little prick." But at that moment as well, what I remembered is the last time he saw me, I was a little prick.
But you almost slipped into victim mentality again.
Yeah, I had that little moment.
Yeah.
That little moment, right? And so what I did, not out of character, but very much out of character from what I would have been like, as I walked over there and I introduced myself and I said, "Hello, mister." I was very polite. "Nice to see you again. I haven't seen you for a long time." And he looked at me, and after about a minute of me talking, he went, it was really strange. He said to me, "I recognise your face." He said, "But apart from that, I've never met you before in my life." And he said, and I didn't go into too much detail. I just told him a little snippet of my story, and he just shook my hand and he said, "It's nice to see you."
That's a beautiful, actually, that's the beautiful example of your journey and where you'd got to, because there's going to be people that are going to be in dark places and think, there's no way out of here. There's no, I'm just on this road of self-destruction, but
it's also the fear. It's also the
fear as well.
The fear
Fear
of what
as well,
people
yeah.
are going to think about you.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that person's opinion of you is based on their experience of you.
Yeah.
You know.
But you can get to a point
from the last time that you had any interaction. That's who they think you are.
Yeah.
Now, some people are going to behave in certain ways and some people aren't. But I try to assume the best, And I also have to remember that their reaction to me when they meet me now is based on their previous experience of me. Now, if it's all negative, that's fine. It's not a problem. But my expectation is not... If I go into that seeing someone and my expectation is like, look at me, look at how well I've done. I'm 9 years sober and I've done this and it's fantastic and I need to tell you how good it is so you can give me a pat on the back and tell me how well I've done. No. My interaction is just to have no expectation whatsoever. Like I did, like I said, with that person at the golf club.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like he said to me, and I always remember it. He said, "I know your face, but apart from that, it's like I've never seen you, never met you before."
So we can go through alcoholism and come out the other end, and we can come out better. And there are programs out there that do help people exactly the way that you've kind of explained. We've talked about going through those experiences and going through recovery. What would you say to people that are questioning whether they need to assess their consumption or whether it's becoming an addiction?
I would say the absolute best thing to do is go and find a 12-step program that is relevant to what you think you might be suffering with, and go there for a year and do absolutely everything that is suggested for you to do. Attend meetings, find a sponsor, do the program, get service, do absolutely everything for a whole year. 100%. Be like saying, right, I want to get into better shape, and you go, give me a year. Give me a year of your time. I'm going to sort your diet out. I'm going to give you an exercise regime. Give me 1 year. And if you don't want it, you can have a full refund. Now, if someone said that to you, what could you do in a year with that person?
This is the thing, and I'm so glad you highlighted it, because people will look at a year and think, that long?
Yeah.
When it's not long.
No, it's not at all.
And that time will fly by. It might not even necessarily fly by, but when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, essentially, from an addiction standpoint, you've had someone who's had this bad lifestyle habits for 15, 20 plus years. If a 12-step program can break all of that cycle in 1 year, you've done very, very well.
Yeah.
Very, very well.
So what I'm saying is, go to it for 1 year.
Something actually you said.
Do absolutely everything that is suggested, and if after 1 year you don't want it, all of your misery is refundable. You can have it all back.
There's something you said that was really important, actually. You said, whatever you think you might be going through. And we were having a conversation earlier on about, well, actually, I was having a conversation with somebody else about a mutual friend who thought they had a problem, but thought, if I attend a program or follow some kind of program or some kind of recovery, they might turn around to me and say, you're not an addict. Right?
No one, right, and this is my experience of it, no one can tell you whether you are or you aren't.
Yeah.
That is down for you to decide. Most people, like if we've got someone who doesn't have a drinking problem, right, they won't even think about having a drink. Like the possibility of having a drinking problem will not even enter their mind. If you think you have a drinking problem, you probably have.
Yeah.
On some level. Now, you might be able to, it might be in the early stages, it might be in the mid stages, later stages, whatever, but most people, like, if you don't have an issue with it, you wouldn't even think about it.
You wouldn't think about it. It wouldn't come up in your mind.
It's not even, like...
exactly.
You know, there has to be something has to happen, right? Like in any sort of, or my experience with many issues that I've got, health-wise, like, there's got to be something that causes me to think about it.
Yeah.
Like if I get chest pains, I'm going, oh, is there something wrong? If I've never had a chest pain, then I'm assuming that it's all tickety-boo here. Thanks very much. You know, if I've got a sore knee from like an exercise, you're like, oh, I don't know, maybe my knee's a bit, you know. But if it never hurts, I'm never going to worry about it. So if you've never done if you've never done anything to question your alcohol consumption, such as make a bit of a twat of yourself, you know, or wake up in the morning with one of the things that I don't know if you remember this, but I remember, and it's a common behaviour, and I want to sort of highlight a few behaviours because it might flag up some stuff for people. I used to wake up in the morning and I'd lie in my bed, and the first thing I'd do is go, okay, I'm home, excellent, that's one thing ticked off. The next thing I'd look for would be my phone, and I'd almost like quite apprehensively pick up my phone and see like, oh, what could this say this morning? How many missed calls? You know, have I got a message from you saying Jimmy, G-R, you know, rah-rah, capitals, you know, something like that, or from a girlfriend like, whoa, like, you know. The fear of picking up a phone in the morning You know, people that don't have some form of issue with alcohol, I'm not going to say addiction or alcoholism, but don't have some form of issue with alcohol or their behavior or misuse of alcohol, generally won't pick up their phone and go, oh, you know, especially, you know, I don't want to say like age things, but, you know, I think if you're younger, it's sort of more socially acceptable. But, you know, if I was still doing that now at nearly 40 and I'd just been out last night and woken up this morning and gone, oh, what have we got here? What are these messages? And or looking back through the call log going, who did I call? What did I, you know, that sort of behaviour, that to me was an issue. But you know, absolutely, that no one can tell you whether you're not going to go into a 12-step fellowship and they're going to go like remember, if you've ever been on one of the drink aware courses, I had to go and do one of those, like a drink aware courses. They're not going to give you like a drinking diary and go, okay, so how many units do you normally consume a week? And you go, oh, about 20. They go, oh, I'm sorry, you don't quite qualify for Alcoholics Anonymous. It's kind of 50 units and above, and then you are an alcoholic. Doesn't work like that. It's not to do with volume. No one's going to tell you whether you can or can't be in that room. The only requirement for membership of most fellowships is an honest desire to stop whatever you're doing, drink, drugs, you know, bad behavior around sex or whatever. It's only an honest desire, or it doesn't even say honest anymore. It's just a desire to want to stop. It's essentially you have to have a desire to want to change.
It's something that we talk about a lot, and which is one of our strap lines is take that first step. Take that first step. And what we're saying here is, okay, fine. You might not think you're an addict, but the fact that you're questioning yourself about it means that maybe you should try something, like you said, for a year and see what happens.
I mean, there could, you know, there's multiple different routes, you know. I mean, what did I try to do? So I went for CBT therapy. I did the drink diary. I tried going on medication from the doctors that would almost make me feel a bit sick when I drank. I think they call it, I can't remember what they called it, but I know they still do it. I basically tried every single possible thing apart, I mean, from stopping drinking. I mean, I remember at one particular point I went through going, oh, do you know what? Things really get out of hand when I drink Guinness. It's the Guinness's fault.
Yeah.
So I'll stop drinking Guinness. Or like, do you know what? Whiskey's bad. I'll just stick to vodka. It was always kind of like, it was the type of alcohol's problem as opposed to the fact that it's all alcohol. Yeah. That was the issue. You know, so it was kind of like, you know, do you have those kind of behaviours? Have you decided, like someone says to you, when they say one thing you'll never drink again, then you go, oh, whiskey. Yeah, never drink whiskey again. That gets I get really bad on it. You know, there's quite a lot of people we know that have that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, I won't drink that again. It's not actually just, you know, it's all alcohol.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, I'm not anti-alcohol. You know, I believe that, you know, everyone can do what they want. But
it's when it comes to that point of where you think it's
when it's costing you more than. Do you know what? When it's costing you more than money.
Yeah.
If you're missing days at work, if you're struggling with your relationships in life, if you are not going in the direction you want to in life, if alcohol is costing you more than money, it might be a problem.
Well, it's even what you said earlier on about the dependency of hearing those bottles clanking in the back of your boot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? James, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. You have really touched on the points that we wanted to touch on today, and I think there's some real nuggets in there that will really resonate with people. Personally, mate, I'm so proud of you where you are now, knowing you pre-recovery and post, and you inspire me as well, you know, to kind of move forward and follow that lead. Guys, that's episode 8. Fantastic, James. I mean, I know I could sit here and talk to him for another hour about this. It's just immense what you can take away from that if you are suffering from alcoholism, or even if you, like we've said, you're questioning whether you need to take a step towards recovery. Again, it doesn't need to manifest itself in drinking all day long from morning to night. Like James gave the example of the woman with the bottles clanking in her boot. I think James nailed it. if it's costing you more than money, then it's something that you need to address. So that's episode 8. Join us next week for another entrepreneur and another story.